Welcome to the 2021 Great Cloud Expectations session. This is brought to you by Cloudreach and the Cloudbusting team. The Cloudbusting team is Dave. Hi, Dave. How you doing?
Good, mate. How are you?
I'm all right. Do you want to just let us know who you are?
I will. Hi, everyone. My name is Dave Chapman. I'm the head of strategy and professional services at Cloudreach. And I've been involved in cloud now for probably about 10 years, both on the customer side and in professional services.
Brilliant. And I'm the other half of the Cloudbusting team, although Dan, our producer, might say he's a third of it. I'm Jez Ward. I'm a cloud strategist with Cloudreach. My background, being a CIO, mainly in the hospitality industries, and taken a couple of companies to cloud, and now been working with Cloudreach for about 3 years and helping advise our enterprise customers on cloud and cloud strategy. So we're very excited to be bringing you this particular session. We're going to be talking about where we see the trends in 2021 around cloud and cloud adoption. And I think the first thing that we'd like to point out is this sort of great quote, or misquote as it is, which is, it's not the strongest of the species that survives, nor the most intelligent that survives. It's the one that's most adaptable to change. And I think that's really quite relevant when it comes to any sort of technical change or any journey that you're going on. It's certainly with cloud, there's a lot of change that's needed. You need to adapt a lot. Just a little thing on that quote, it is a misquote. Darwin did not actually say that. What he actually said were that those who survive are the ones that most accurately perceive their environment and successfully adapt to it. The actual quote that was just quoted there and is sort of associated to Darwin was actually by a professor of Louisiana State University, a guy called Leon Medginson. So always interesting to find out some of these little facts. So Dave, do you want to just let us know why we see this as important and change?
Yeah, so it's the environment aspect of it, I think, Jez. And so either quote is pretty much on the money for what we're trying to say with it. And the issue is when your environment and you need to create technology for a particular environment is changing around you, your organization and your technology needs to be able to react to that change. And clearly in 2020, we've seen some profound world events that have accelerated aspects of what's going on in digital and accelerated our understanding of the fact that organizations can adapt to very fundamentally different environments much more quickly and much more interestingly than we might have thought. So if we think about the different eras of cloud adoption within that context, so the first is IT-driven cloud adoption. It's the very early stages of cloud adoption, and it still happens today. IT-driven cloud adoption is typically driven by some form of cost-saving based business case, and it might be exiting a data center. A couple of years after that started, we began to start to see the emergence of business experimentation. This might be with areas of your business that are going to work with SaaS companies, or it might be particularly motivated business leaders or product leaders within an organization who are interested in maybe building new services that are going to be impacting revenue and maybe changing from B2B to B2C or bringing in new revenue for the organization. And business experimentation dotted up around organizations. And actually that led in part to the rise of the CDO role, or the Chief Digital Officer, alongside the more traditional Chief Information Officer, which were more involved in the cost-driven aspect of what's going on. So we had this pattern across a lot of enterprises, IT doing a lot of heavy lifting, trying to move big systems and huge volumes of systems, and interesting business experimentation around the edge that was really driving revenue, driving business change very effectively. We think the third era of business transformation, which is when you join all of those dots and begin to start to see whole enterprises beginning to pivot, is going to be accelerated by what's happened in 2020. So changes like immediately being able to snap into remote working over the course of days or weeks, which under normal circumstances would have taken many months or years for an organization to get its head around, has woken up organizations to the possibility of much more profound and much bigger joined up change.
Yeah, I mean, we definitely see this with our customers, right? We still have customers that are where cloud adoption is being IT led, and almost in all cases, certainly the ones that I've been working with, they really struggle to get that out into the organization. You know, the change is great. There's some amazing stuff you can do on cloud, but the rest of the business struggles with it because it's IT trying to drive it. Where we see really successful transformations go on are where the business stops treating IT as a utility and treats it as a true business partner. And it's really a collaborative effort between the business. You know, the business has to stop doing shadow IT and just work with IT. IT has to be more responsive, more agile, work together, and you see really successful transformations take place. But it does require, you know, business to change. It does require IT to change. You know, IT is certainly not blameless in sometimes they sit on top of these ivory towers. So, yeah, I think really that, you know, for that era to take effect, we've got to see this sort of collaborative working between IT and business. So, Dave, what's trend number 2?
So, trend number 2 talks about continuity. As we said in the first trend, there were principally 2 things that were really driving cloud change. Number 1, some form of cost-driven impetus, and number 2, sort of business experimentation, often called agility, often called reducing time to market, and that's all about getting new services to market really quickly. So it's pretty common when you're doing the cloud business case at the moment to really have one of the other or both of those 2 things in play in the conversation. But we think, given the profound level of capability that the cloud has given the world during the pandemic, that a third focus area for business cases is going to emerge over the coming year or so, and that will be continuity driven. So this is when an organization post the pandemic is having business continuity scenarios and working through what might disrupt their business in future, and be taking a much more profound look about the scale of impact that might be now expected in the future, because the bar has been so completely reset by the pandemic this year. So where previously something as hugely world level disruptive as this would probably not have been in the top 10 of most business continuity scenarios, this will probably go right up into the top 10, if not into the top 5 in those conversations. And that will drive much more long-term shift towards this sort of working that we're all experiencing at the moment. Like, for example, at the moment, we're doing this presentation from our homes because this is the only place that we can do them from. But the very fact we're being able to do it means that the world can continue in a fashion. So we think that, driven by remote working, driven by the emergence of new digital services really quickly during the pandemic, businesses finding ways to continue, that continuity will become a real key business reason to be able to move to the cloud.
Yeah, and this is much more the agile approach to change, right? So I think typically pre-pandemic there was a bit more of a waterfall approach to cloud and cloud adoption, digital transformation in itself. It's like, what are we going to do over the next 12 months? The pandemic brought everything into, what are we going to do tomorrow? And we've suddenly got to get all of our workers working remotely. We need to make that change tomorrow. So this ability to sort of change quickly, make that sort of keep that sort of continuity as we're talking about. You have to be able to do it now, right? And I think the great thing about cloud is if you've got the right foundations, the right architecture, you absolutely have that ability to do those quick pivots, those quick shifts. And I think that's really quite key that companies are thinking about that going forward. So, trend number 3.
So this is connected to the similar line of thinking. And this is about the changing nature of digital services also during the pandemic this year, which we think is going to drive next level build-in resilience, not only to the digital service itself, but also the supply chain. So, for example, online grocery ordering and delivery became not just like a luxury service or a convenience service during the pandemic, particularly the major lockdown aspects of it, but it became almost like a lifeline in certain situations. So the sort of redefinition of the level of importance of that service has sort of begun, which means it's almost like critical infrastructure level rather than just something that was, previously perhaps seen as a bit of a luxury. Now, what that means really is easy to understand when you begin to start to look at what some of the large grocery retailers had to do, which is they had to throttle access to their websites. They only had so many delivery slots. They only had so much capacity in their delivery systems and physical delivery logistics. And then the supply chains into those services, which is actually, obviously the stocking of groceries and making sure that they're all in place, was all put under stress when their customer loads went up sort of 100%, 200%, 1,000%. So thinking about that then from a technology design perspective and from a business design perspective, it will be important to begin to start to think about scalability in a whole other different way and begin to start to build in resilience along the supply chain for whatever's sitting behind those business services. So built-in resilience always been important, but much like continuity-driven business cases, I think what we've seen this time is a level of stress on some of those systems that were already highly resilient and already highly scalable that were really pushed to their limits. So this may well create a breakthrough moment when we have to look at resilience in a whole other different way with a whole other different level of scalability.
Yeah, and I also think there's a huge amount of opportunity here, right? I think we're talking about resilience and the fact that that sort of luxury apps became almost life-saving apps during this pandemic and lockdown. I think this whole sort of lockdown COVID situation that we're all going through at the moment is going to change people's habits. And I look at, although we're not allowed to go to the pub at the moment, in lockdown, when the pubs were open after the first lockdown that we had, it was lovely to go to a pub, sit at a table, and either use an app or have somebody come over to you and serve you at the table. I think going back to the days of going to a pub and there being 4 people deep at a bar and you're trying to get the bartender's attendance, bartender's acknowledgement, and having had that luxury experience of get me my drink, I really see that there's massive opportunity in all sorts of areas around that, and sort of bringing this new technology in. So great opportunity. And definitely, I know there's a bunch of, certainly the F&B space, there's a bunch of companies that are trying to come up with innovative solutions in this area. So, take us to trend number 4, please, Dave.
So this is an interesting one, and it connects a bit to trend 1, which is, in trend 1, we could see that IT-driven adoption was happening and business experimentation were happening. But as Jez said, those two things didn't often come together. And as a result of that, you didn't get a really substantial business transformation created in a lot of organizations that really could have had the opportunity to do that. And partly this is to do with where IT is in an organization. So not all organizations today, for example, have their CIO on the board. They may have the CIO reporting somewhere else, reporting maybe a level down below the management team, maybe into the CFO, maybe into the COO. And as a result of that, IT conversations have often become very cost-centric and very framed by cost saving rather than investment-driven to drive bigger change. So what we think's happened over the course of the last 6 months, and we think will actually pervade into that era 3 much more profound transformation, is that the boards themselves, where historically they might have seen IT as not delivering change on the level that we have seen it, maybe slightly reframing their views of the possibility of tech change in their organization. So we think that decision making at board level around how they're going to implement technology change in their organization, whether it's customer facing services, or whether it's the internal change that's required to really be able to start working differently and using technology differently. The obvious example of that is how working from home has profoundly changed how we're all working at the moment. Now, the jury's out on how long that will pervade. But what is almost certain to happen is that board level and chief executive level will be involved in the conversation about what they want their organizations to be as we all begin to start to return to life as normal, hopefully in 2021. What it will also do is it will be reflecting on the amount of technology-driven change that's in society, as Jez was saying there. You know, from the examples of ordering drinks differently in restaurants, all the way through to the sort of, you know, grocery deliveries, full supply chain re-engineering, that kind of thing. We'll be now in that conversation on a wholly different level than we've seen probably since the mid-90s and the emergence of very large-scale ERP deployments that allowed organizations to begin to start to look at themselves a bit more globally. So I think this combined with technology being ready, combined with all of the societal drivers, and then chief executives and their top teams being involved in the decisions being made around technology and how it's going to impact their organizations, is really going to drive that third era of adoption.
Yeah, and I think that the role of the CIO will probably change. As you were saying, traditionally at the moment, it's kind of board minus one. If you're going to have a CIO that's on the board, they're probably going to need a bit more of a business head than maybe a tech head. You know, I think you probably have a CTO reporting into a CIO. Ultimately, I think that CIO would need to be pretty finance savvy, because obviously cost will play an element to it. But there's also the sort of the value that you can bring by going down the cloud journey. So yeah, you'll need somebody who understands EBITDA and all those lovely finance acronyms that you've got. But yeah, I do think that the role of the CIO will change. Maybe even, you know, whether you'll call it CIO in the future or not. I'm not sure. I don't think we're quite ready to get rid of that role as it stands at the moment, but it may disappear. So that takes us to trend number 5. What is that, Dave?
So this is about what we refer to as adaptable organizations. Now, we talked about adaptable organizations in Trends 2022, or rather Trends 2022, not Trends 2022. So that's confusing. But like last year's Trends, we talked about adaptable organizations, and what this is looking at fundamentally how the organization itself creates empowerment and structures that allow the level of innovation that we've been talking about to actually work, not only when an organization is under stress from something like the pandemic, but generally, and constantly iterating and thinking about change. So we think there are broadly 2 types of organization at play. There's the traditional hierarchical organization, and there is more of a networked organization, which is non-hierarchical and very kind of output and function centric. Excuse me. The hierarchy is very fit for purpose for organizations that want to drive stability, they want to scale out, they want to be able to be efficient in what they do and have lots of repeatable, strong process. It also supports kind of longer range planning very well. So for example, you set somebody's KPIs for the next year, or the financial plan for the next year, or even 3 years in some cases, and then that cascades very elegantly through the hierarchy, and it means that the system itself then knits together to deliver on those KPIs. Well, what happens if the world changes during the period between the KPIs being set and the KPIs being delivered? What does the organization then do? Well, a lot of times you get resistance to change as a result of the fact they're sticking to their pre-agreed plans. And that means that organizations actively resist what their market is telling them to do. Now, in a networked organization, it's set up fundamentally differently. You have product teams that are deeply empowered, that are working with full top to bottom stacks. So they own everything from the product decision, sometimes all the way down to the underlying infrastructures. And they can make decisions in the moment, on the day, about what they change and what they release to the market. That then also allows them to use, technical tools and monitoring of user behaviors, and then responding really quickly within their products to those user behaviors. It's what often drives doing many releases a day of particular technology, some of which is response to the market and some of which is provocation of the market. So you can see what a user likes or doesn't like, and then you can bring that in, make the change, put it back out again. So an adaptable organization then has a combination of hierarchy where needed, often in very operational areas, and network where necessary, which is often in areas that are looking to innovate, looking forward to drive new product to market and drive the organization forward. A couple of key elements that we think are important about adaptable organizations. The first is to have a keen and clear understanding of what the purpose of the organization is. So the deep empowerment, say, of the network section of the organization doesn't end up spiraling off in multiple different directions. And then the second is this notion of restructured governance. So there's not a great deal of point of putting in place things like DevOps teams, things like CI/CD pipelines, things like product owners that have got everybody that they need to develop their product reporting into them, if you take away their ability to make decisions. So allowing them, on behalf of the company, to make decisions, as I was saying earlier, about things like release, all within the right boundaries of security and regulation and ethics and morals, to be able to make the right business decisions on behalf of the business and go forward with putting things out. What you will find in that situation is much faster innovation, a much more energized environment where people are seeking to innovate because they have the permission to do so and they've got the space to do so. But when it comes to the point then of taking one of these innovations and having to scale it and having to stabilize it, that might be the time to consider pushing it into the more hierarchical, traditional operations structure. Not to say necessarily, by the way, that you would break the linkage between dev and ops if you've got a successful DevOps stack, but there are different ways of managing to create stability around very live products.
Yeah, and I think we can sort of revert back to Darwin or Medicine here, that to survive you've got to change, right? And you've got to adapt to that change. And I think we've got to be careful that this isn't just about a tech change. This is a cultural change. It requires lots of small areas of the business all working together, all sort of following and driving in the same direction, following the same purpose, all working in an agile way, and really focusing on the business outcomes. And that is where you're going to really see the benefits. And it's just everybody being open to that change within all areas of the business. Don't just rely on the IT team to do it. So that takes us to the last trend, number 6. Dave, what is that?
Thanks, Jez. So this again is a build on some of the technical trends that we had in last year's trends deck. And what we talked about in last year's trends deck was again how you create adaptable technology architectures that allow you to innovate your technology or customer experiences or digital experiences at different levels of the infrastructure. So, the top level, or the customer-facing level, the channels, if you like, which could be, IoT devices, or they could be, traditional PCs or mobile devices, all the way through to more sophisticated edge architectures. Keeping that separate from the middleware layer, where you've got APIs, you've got microservices that a lot of which contain the business logic, and then separating that again from the data at the back end, which may be at this point in lakes, or it could still be in structured databases, depending on what you've done with your data architectures. Keeping those things loosely coupled allows innovation in multiple different ways. It allows you to add experiences and remove them. It allows you to add functionality and remove them without compromising the whole. So that cloud native way of going about building architectures is something that has frustrated a lot of organizations. So a lot of organizations that invested heavily in moving to the cloud have got to the cloud and they've found that the promise of the cloud, if you like, has not been delivered. And what that means is that they have often just moved what they had in their old data center, moved it onto the cloud, and suddenly found that it's expensive, or suddenly found that they're not innovating quickly. I mean, the promise there was we were going to be able to do innovation and we were going to be able to do lots of releases a day, and actually it looks about the same to me. Well, that comes down to the journey that they've been on to go to the cloud. And it's about choosing the right journey. It's about working out where you want your modernization to happen to allow you to create cloud native architectures, experiences, cost points, will all require a level of transformation in the technology, and a level of transformation in how you run the technology, a level of transformation in how you then develop applications. So part of a cloud journey needs to be a detailed assessment of what you just want to move to the cloud because you need to exit something, and what actually requires much more profound investment and thought in the design about moving a particular application. And that will be different for every organization going on this journey. And it will require thoughtfulness about the environments that have been created on the cloud that you can then move your applications into.
Yeah, we do get a lot of customers coming to us saying, right, I've moved to the cloud, but I'm still under constant pressure to reduce cost, and what can I do now? And yeah, really, modernizing is not an end state, right? It's something that you can do to continuously improve your the applications, the workloads that you've got there. If you look at the CSPs, they're all bringing in new features. AWS, constantly is bringing new features to the offering. It may be that a tricky app that 12 months ago you just really didn't have a landing point on cloud may well have that now. And I think you've got to take that concept of I can continuously improve. I can continuously look at the workloads that I'm running, and potentially something that I re-platform. Maybe now I can refactor, make it completely cloud native, completely serverless, and don't think of this as an endpoint. Don't say, right, I've moved to the cloud and I've modernized and I'm now done.
And Jez, I think that's leading to innovation in the supplier market. So where previously the building of an application and the running of an application, were quite different sometimes in different contracts, sometimes with different suppliers. What those contractual breaks prevented you doing was achieving the agility that we've been talking about. So I would look out over the course of the next year for innovations like DevOps as a service, or something like continuous development utility services from providers like Cloudreach, where you can plug them directly in at any point in the journey and have backlogs managed at the same time as operational environments managed. That will allow you to manage your transformation onto the cloud, as well as what Jez was saying, which is continuous evolution as soon as you land on the cloud. Like, don't let those things sit still, and make sure you look innovatively at not only the programs of work you put in place to achieve these things, but then how you contractualize the support for them following the migration.
Great. And just a couple of things on that. So we have a product called Cloudemize that I think we're doing some demos in the virtual meeting space that we have. I think you can find more about that on our sponsor page, apparently. But so please do feel free to sign in and take a look at that. We've also got a podcast where we spoke a little bit about this, one of the Cloudbusting podcasts, where we had a customer, Key to Act, came on and discussed some of this. And again, I think you can find the details of that on the sponsor page. So that is our trends. Do please feel free to listen to the Cloudbusting podcast. We have a lot of fun doing it. We try not to keep it too technical. It's a lot of fun, a lot of entertainment on there, and a lot of great guests that come on. So please, you can find it anywhere that you can find your podcasts. Please do visit our sponsor page. We are very much looking forward to hearing from you. You can tweet us at CloudbustingPod, and we will hopefully talk to you next year with Cloud Trends 2022. Thank you very much.